What's up guys? Today I'm going to show you how I build a very simple and affordable porch swing. My porch is a little thin, so I have to make mine a little bit less than 4 feet wide, but it is still plenty of room for 2 people. But I will put in the description below of a 4-foot swing so that you can follow along very easily. And once I'm done with the main cuts, I start laying out the wood to see what the frame will look like and make sure all the measurements are how I need them to be. And once I'm done laying out the framework of this swing, I start by getting some 1x3s and cut them to the length I need for my swing. The two different measurements I use for these slats are 44 inches and 47 inches. Next, I grab my 2x4 that's measured out at 24 inches and grab my jigsaw and cut out the butt rest for this swing. I didn't really use a specific jig or template for this, I just cut it based off of what looked good and what I thought would be the most comfortable. And once you're done cutting out that first butt rest, go ahead and use that first one as a template for the other two so that they match as closely as possible. Once I'm done cutting all them butt scoops, I start clamping them down so I can sand them to be level with each other. Now I'm going to set my table saw to 15 degrees. I have found that this angle is one of the most comfortable angles for a porch swing, so you can go ahead and make it between 15 and 20, and that seems to be the sweet spot for this swing. As I go along through these cuts, I'd be sure to start sanding down each cut as I go so that I do not have to do this at the end once this swing is all put together. And the way I decided to attach these back braces is with some pocket hole screws. This is honestly not the best way to do it, but because I am using some 2x4s that hold up the armrests, that gives it a whole lot more support, so this doesn't have me too worried. Next, I grab my tape measure and measure out the center of this board so that I can make sure the middle bracket is perfectly centered. I decided to use a countersink bit for pretty much every screw that I put into this porch swing, which will help prevent any cracks or splits in the wood later on. I grabbed a scrap wood of 2x4 so I can place it at the end of this just to make the screw heads go into this as square as possible. Once the main frame is all put together, I start by sanding down all of these slats prior to attaching them just to make it a whole lot easier when I finish this so I don't have to try and sand every nook and cranny throughout the swing once it's already put together. And routing the edges of these boards is completely optional, but it does end up looking nicer in the end. I decided to just paint my swing white because I had some leftover paint from a prior build, but I do suggest either painting, staining, or at least sealing the wood because this will more than likely be an outdoor piece for you. And I suggest painting or staining the frame and the slats separately, just to make it a whole lot easier to get the entire surface covered. Once all the boards are painted, I grab one slat and get my countersink bit and drill the first 3 holes into that board. And then I use that board for a template to drill the holes into the rest of the boards. This will keep all your screw heads lined up just to give it a more uniform look. And next I start by attaching the armrest supports on the front end and back end of this porch swing frame. For the rear armrest supports, be sure to put a few screws on the bottom end and the top end of the 2x4 just to give it more support on this end, since we did put those pocket hole screws on these back braces. Now I am ready to place the actual armrests on this frame. I put about 2 screws on the front end and 2 screws in the back end just to give it some stability on these braces. Be sure to leave as much room as you can on the outside lip so that we'll have plenty of room for the holes when we drill them through, so that this chain can go through these armrests. And now I am ready to start placing these slots onto this frame. And the way I space them out is just by using another slot in between them to give it an even spacing throughout the entire frame. And now that all the slots are placed, I can now drill the holes onto each side of these armrests. I decided to use a 1/2 inch bit, but you can probably use smaller or larger depending on the size of chain that you use. And for the chain to attach to the back end, I decided to just go straight through that armrest because to me that seemed like the safest and easiest way to do this. But another way to do this is just by drilling a hole in the back end of the armrest and go all the way down through that 2x4 of the armrest brace. And honestly, this step is not really needed, but because I chose to paint my swing white, I decided I wanted to fill all the holes I made with the screws and fill any gaps I wanted to with this caulk, and then repaint over it to give it a much cleaner and smoother look. Now that I'm all done with this swing, I'm going to start hanging it on my porch, and you may have to do some adjustments with the chain to try and make it as level or at an angle that you want, but overall I think this swing turned out great. And if y'all haven't already, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel, and if you have any ideas of what you want me to build next, go ahead and leave that in the comments below. Thank y'all for watching this video. Take care.